really think that that's a plus.
That's great, George. Those numbers always look good on paper. So that's definitely going to make it into the plan because it is a strength that the town-owned lands, and acknowledging that you have the possession of those lands and can control the destiny of those lands. That's very important for the town to realize the programming and what happens on that. And thank you, Donna, for your comments. Anyone else? What's going well?
One of the things that we have that I inherited when I moved here as the rec director is that we have a study on both Heritage Park and Brown Farm, which is two parcels that are underdeveloped or underutilized, or however you want to categorize that. And I think that we do a good job of using the space that we have to the fullest, almost to the point where we don't have a chance to rest any of our playing fields. But the fact that we use them, and we even utilize Lenox, which is a property that is owned by, I guess it's American Saw now, but we have 4 fields, playing fields that we utilize over at Lenox also. So.
Great.
I'd also like to make the comment that open space privately owned currently includes at least 8 working farms in town, of which Carissa owns 1 or 2, I think. And at a large amount of that acreage is under the control of one individual, John Burney, who's very interested in continuing agriculture in town. Conversely, there is a large parcel of farmland that has not been farmed for some time that is now slated for development.
I'm presuming that there's an opportunity for East Longmeadow residents to fill out the Padlet link on the website, and in review of it, there was a comment about a subdivision plan, and maybe that is what you're alluding to, George, with regards to that on a large swath of land.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. That's great. Yeah, so I think understanding that, and I will say that a lot of the things that are going to go into this particular chapter also exists in your open space plan. So there's context there to build upon, and George is our chapter captain for this, so he will definitely ensure that the big points from the open space plan will make it into this master plan. So in relation to this question, what needs support in the terms of recreational open space and natural resources?
Carissa, would you like to talk about what support agriculture needs in this town? Do we need a right to farm law?
Hi, George. I actually don't have a lot of familiarity with right to farm. When I first started farming in town, and I was given permission to farm on my Residence A property, I thought that was right to farm, and have a farm stand, and all those things were under the zoning. So I actually, maybe you could clarify a little what further protections or opportunities right to farm gives farmers.
I'm not an expert on that at all. We might ask maybe some of our backup consultants to help us on that, to understand what the differences would be, because agriculture is a right within all the residential zones, but there are issues occasionally, shall we say, with conflicts with neighbors. And I don't know if right to farm would address some of that. We've had complaints about, for instance, fat-bellied pigs being raised, that sort of thing. And so there may be more protection that's needed. I'm not sure.
Yeah, in my little quiet vegetable operation, you know, I haven't had the need for that, but I have heard things from other farmers when they were, you know, putting on large events and, you know, wanting to make money with more of the agritourism and trying to work with the town on parking and permitting for that. I don't know if that falls under the jurisdiction of right to farm, but nothing has stopped me. I haven't felt stymied yet in town in my farming operation, which is great.
Great. Yeah, no, I think that's important. Right to farm, I think George hits the nail on the head as far as some of the concepts regarding right to farm. There is a disclosure that's usually attached to that, specific to real estate transactions. But it does provide that additional protection, however that looks. And it seems as if, Carissa, that your farming activity is permitted within the current zoning, whether or not it's exempted from zoning or you know, there's bylaws in place for that. But I think it's good to identify that as a possible way to increase the protection of farming in town, because that definitely has been identified as an issue. Anyone else with regards to what needs support in recreational, open space, natural resources?
We need, as far as the recreational piece, and this is just, I'm saying this from the demand that I'm getting, is that we need more playing fields. We also need, we need a recreation center in town. This, especially we've always just used the schools to the max of what we've been able to do. Now with COVID, we've been really restricted on what we're able to do. The schools, they're used, you know, until 9 o'clock at night. And we have coaches that are going to Powerhouse and Soccer City and the over here where they bought Arbor's Kids, and our coaches are fundraising and paying out of pocket for indoor playing time in town because we aren't able to meet their needs. And that's kind of, I struggle with that because we're not able to do that. So it's a tough one with me because I also don't want to build a lot of things and take up open space personally, but then again, it's the demand that I'm getting that we need fields. And then our DPW who maintains our fields, they're always telling me, can you rest a field? Can you rest a field? Because it's never going to grow back if we don't rest a field. And Joe, I owe you an email, but Joe from the baseball said, you know, we've got enough kids. Can we make another team? And it's like, well, where are we going to put another team? So we have to be, you know, conscious. We can't just keep adding kids and then we don't have anywhere to play. So that's just some of the feedback I'm getting from coaches and parents from the recreation side. Jordy, I don't know if you want to add to that. I shouldn't put you on the spot. Sorry. He'll speak up.
No,
if he
that's
wants.
fine. No, that's fine. I would ditto that. I would definitely ditto the community center aspect of it. It's just very difficult to try to, you know, create new, you know, programs and events and not have the space to do so. So I would definitely just agree with that.
One of the things that I've been running into for decades now is that although we have a lot of town-owned open space, most of it is not very accessible, even for able-bodied people. The trails have never really been developed except for an occasional Boy Scout trying to get his Eagle badge. And a lot of those lands, I mean, I've explored personally, but I'm very good at wading streams and getting over fallen trees and all that kind of thing. But there really is a potential for a lot of much more accessible use of the open space that we have. We just never put the money into it or look for grants to be able to develop, not develop in the terms of development, but in terms of improving trails and improving access over the years. And it's something that I would love to see, but I just don't know how to make happen. And people that know those areas utilize them, but they're very underutilized and could be actually a much better asset to the town if they were publicized and also if the trails were made usable by normal people.
I guess I'll piggyback off of that comment of George's. I think another issue that I've seen and I've talked with Donna from the rec department about is the lack of the volunteer capacity in town to take over some of that trail maintenance work. I don't think there's any true committee in town that has been sustained over the years whose sole responsibility is to help maintain those trails. So part of the issue is just that lack of capacity in our volunteer basis, which kind of prevents us from building out more trails if we can barely maintain the ones that we have currently.
Yeah, I would say, echoing what George said, I think building off of, existing property that we have, Brownfield is a property that the CPC acquired a number of years ago. And I really wasn't that aware of it only until I got onto CPC and became the chair. So, in terms of, I would like to see maybe in the future some more development with that. I think we've got a ton of potential. I live right nearby Heritage Park. So I think there's a lot of opportunities definitely to be had at our fields and other complexes that I think have been very well utilized with sports and whatnot. Being somebody who went through the school system, I remember Lenox, I remember Heritage Park. So we have a couple good spots, but looking at maybe expanding those would be, I think, very important for our growing population.
We also have Pine Knoll, which is a huge asset where Jordy lives in the summer with the community pool.
What other facilities are offered there? You said a community pool. Is there courts? Can you specify what is at that site?
There are courts that are pretty much unusable. There's a sand volleyball that's court that's unusable. There are soccer fields that we use. There are 6 outbuildings that are they're seasonal. There's an admin building that we grew out of by the time it opened. And that's and of course the community pool. That's it.
Okay. Thank you.
I know that we worked with Donna recently with the CPC, and we're going to be having, I think, a playground that's also going to be going on those grounds. So I think, hopefully if that's, we recommended that, so we're waiting for final approval on that. So hopefully that will be another kind of good addition to the Pine Knoll grounds, especially for kids that are doing, summer programs and whatnot.
Yeah. We normally run 9 weeks of camp at Pine Knoll. Because of the situation this year, we weren't able to have as many kids, but we expanded it to 12 weeks to help with childcare. And we also did an after-school program until until the weather shut us in and we couldn't do any more.
I would like to just say that I've lived in East Longmeadow as a resident for about 6-7 years now. And until I started getting involved a little bit, which is about 2 years, I really don't know where any of these places are. And I would like to really see the town make an effort to use the reminder, use whatever you've got to make sure that everyone in town knows what's going on without having to dig around and ask questions, and just, something's out there that we can get enthusiastic about our open spaces and our recreational areas. Also, I'd like to see some intergenerational activities. I mean, I don't frequent the senior center, although I'm quite a senior. I'm up into those years, but I really don't like being, quote, with all old people, I'd like to be somewhere where children are playing, families are there. The rail trail, the times I've been on it during good weather, it's pretty individualistic, you just walk and there's no place to really gather. I'm hoping that there might be something in the center of town where people can stop and gather and talk and maybe have an ice cream or something to drink. That isn't just commercialized, but that is really part of the town. So I think a lot of seniors miss that. We miss the intergenerational activities, especially if we don't have family in the area.
Princess, I'll send you in some information. What we did last fall was we started an intergenerational group, and it was
wow.
seniors and it was kids. And
Wow.
what we did because of the COVID situation is that I thought, what if we bring several generations together? And we had to stop, of course, when the weather got bad, but it was very interesting to have someone who, was in the war to talk about, what they went through, or a retired teacher, what they went through, or the kids talking about what it was like now to go through remote. And some of these sessions went on for an hour and a half because they just kept talking. So we plan on doing more of that. And the ice rink that was new this year, I was surprised at how many seniors that we had skating, that could have signed up for senior skate, but chose to come and skate when the kids were there. So I think we have a lot of opportunity, and I would definitely like to reach out to you if you'd like to help us develop that piece, because I'm aware of it, but we have a long ways to go.
That would be great. I live at Brownstone Gardens. So much of what you're saying, people here are not aware of in general. And normally we get our information through our newsletter or flyers that are sent into the management office. So I'm willing to help with that. You can be in touch with me. Thank you.
That's great. I think that's wonderful that, some idea with regards to Francis bringing up the intergenerational activities, which is I think a common topic that's brought up in these conversations, especially with some of our communities that demographics show the population getting older. So I love that Donna was able to connect with regards to that programming. So understanding, some of Donna's comments earlier with regards to some of the, the responsibilities of the rec department, and some ideas of the responsibility of the town to promote and provide those services to the townspeople. This is going to be with regards to natural resource protection. In your opinion, what is the local government's responsibility for natural resource protection? I know George probably has much to say regarding this.
Having been on planning and conservation prior to that, it's a difficult situation because obviously, if somebody owns a piece of property, they have the right to the economic use of that property. And so you can't say, no, you can't put a development in. I mean, I can't tell you the number of people who've come up to me and said, no more development, stop them. You can't do that, okay? It's impossible. What we can do is protect the lands that we have by responsible development of things like trails, and making people aware of the resources that we have so that they will help to protect them. I mean, the rail trail was, I thought, I was on the committee that made that happen, and everybody said, well, why are we spending this money? It's never going to be used. And is one of the most used recreational facilities in town. It's astonishing to me the number of people that use the rail trail on a daily basis, even in the middle of the winter. And so that's the kind of thing, if people are aware of opportunities and use them, then they get protected. If they don't, they get trashed. It's that simple.
That's a great.
So
Wow.
it seems as if there's a little bit of an information gap in terms of natural resource protection as well as general recreation opportunities. I know that Francis had said this earlier, so that's interesting that this kind of, this is a problem that a lot of people are noticing. Any kind of ideas about how we can address the gap with wayfinding or similar, more signage? What do you all think would be a good way to address it?
I think you actually just said one of them was some signage. I mean, some of the obvious ones like Heritage Park, you can tell that obviously that's where that is, but most of the other places in town, unless you knew about it or were involved with the project or just knowing that it exists, you would have no idea. You would drive right by it and not know that that piece of woods is actually some sort of town-owned property for your use for something.
I also think that people would go on the town website, and maybe just a banner or something on the first page about recreational and natural resources that are available. And then you click on that and you go into the page where you can get more information. But it's okay to have everything about town government, but also to highlight the good things about the town would be wonderful. Also, as a member of the Conservation Commission, and I'm glad that Bethany is here because she can add to this, we are trying to get information out to targeted neighborhoods about protection of the natural resources in certain parts of town. And there's a grant that we're applying for, right, Bethany?
Yep, it's a relatively small grant, but it's enough to fund some informational brochures or some other type of mailing out to a neighborhood just to let them know of any conservation restrictions. So we were thinking the butters along the Pacusic Brook, there's been some violations there, pretty innocent violations, but violations nonetheless. So just letting them know how they can better care for the brook and help its integrity.
And that can lead to community action. And I think that's a part of the volunteer system. So if there was a department in town that was responsible for volunteerism, well, as a result, we can work together. So as a result of what we do on the Conservation Commission, we may find some neighbors in that neighborhood who want to be more involved. They may say, gee, I really want to make sure that the river gets cleaned up or the brook and that the resources are protected. So we had Boy Scouts, a wonderful Boy Scout came to the commission and volunteered and built a bench out, I think it's in Brown Field, right? Brown Farm. And that was a good sign. So maybe that could be tapped as another resource, as both Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts in town.
Yeah, I think I have some high hopes of creating like an adopted trail section opportunity where people can take responsibility for a section of trails. I've talked to a couple of business owners who have their businesses along the rail trail and who are really interested in not only fixing up the section that abuts the trail, but being even more part of it and adopting a section of it and just maintaining it. So it's really just setting up the background work of the website and everything like that, and having a place for all this energy to go. That's the gap that I'm seeing. It's not that the community doesn't want to help out. It's just there's a dead end where there isn't a tool built yet to organize and coordinate that energy.
It's also not a tool that for our fundraising efforts. One of the things that as a new to the town, I've noticed is that we have, high school soccer going to a local business and they want money for this. And then we have, recreation soccer going to a business and they want money for this. And it's all scattered. There's no one place that we can do a major corporate private fundraising piece for our town. So I do have a committee. They're on the last steps of getting their 501c3. So I would really, when it comes to volunteers, I really would like to see us join our fundraising efforts in town. Just because I think the feedback I've heard from some of the smaller businesses is that every season they get hit with the same sports and the same things. And it's just very unorganized when you're trying to get big projects done. So.
That's great. Okay, so I think before sending it off to Shannon, I'd like to ask one more question. And this is town policies. And, normally this probably the town budgets will come up in this conversation, but it's specific to where and how do town policies not align with the wants or needs of East Longmeadow residents regarding its natural, recreational, and open space resources? Anyone?
So
It's a
any,
tough question.
specific town, procedures or policies that you think might not, might hinder or, a specific access to natural resources or, just provide a general barrier. We'd love to hear what you have to say.
It's all about money. I mean, Donna
Don't I know
knows
it?
this. Bethany knows this. It's all about money. We don't have budget for a lot of the things that we'd like to do. And I think some of our newer town employees are doing a great job in terms of seeking out grants to help us do that. But in our basic budget, we don't have the money to do a lot of this stuff. It just comes down to that. And it's not the fault of the town or the town government. It's just the fact that we only have so much money and we have higher priorities like schools. And so we have to live with that and work around it.
Okay.
I'm sorry, this
Anyone
may
else?
not be the time or place to bring it up, but that gets back to the fact that the population in East Longmeadow has not grown significantly over many, many years. And so if we're a property tax based town, which we are, money isn't going to increase unless we increase the population. And I notice on the Conservation Commission, and those of you who are on the planning board know more about this than I do, but there's a lot of demand right now for building housing complexes that are rather high end. And that's okay, but some of it is very much possibly interfering with conservation areas. So we have a lot of work. This year we've worked very hard on the Conservation Commission. And I would just, and I think I did speak to Ken at some point about the housing piece of this. So it's connected. These things are all interconnected. So yeah, we like to be a nice small town and whatever, but if you want more money and you want to develop, you have to think about population, diversity of population. And we have businesses, maybe there could be other kinds of businesses that could be attracted here.
And
It's about
on
increasing
that
the
note,
tax base, right? Sorry.
No, it's okay. On that note, if there is development pressure, maybe but we are trying to conserve resources, natural resources. Could we have more smart growth policies in place in town so that when a developer comes, we say, you either have to meet these criteria or we incentivize them to meet certain criteria so that they offset the development, or if they make their developments more clustered or of a certain size and they conserve some of the green space in their development, that it's incentivized for them so that they're encouraged to develop in a way that conserves some open space instead of eating it all up.
That's definitely a great comment. I invite you all to well, Frances, hopefully she'll be joining us tomorrow at the housing focus group. But I think, the comments that you bring up and its relation to the other elements of the plan is so important. Preserving land, ensuring that your economic development base is met by the land and the land policies that you create. And so I think with that, I'm going to, unless Fiona maybe wants to add something, or if there is a last comment with regards to this, I invite you all to, look at this document and fill it out to whatever extent that you want. And I'd be happy to incorporate some of these comments. And I'm looking forward to incorporating your comments that you've shared this evening into the chapter. But I'll give it to Shannon to start her conversation.
Great. Okay, thank you. I wrote all over the paper that has my questions on, so I'm gonna try to read it now. Okay, my first question to start us off, and again, I'm the Historic Preservation Planner for the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. Thank you everybody for joining us tonight. I'm going to start with, in your opinion, what are the most important historic and cultural resources in East Longmeadow? And this would include, in my opinion, places, events, and also agricultural resources, because they are also part of the history and culture of East Longmeadow.
I'll jump in again just to get things started.
Thank you.
Clearly, the quarries are important. The Center Hill Park, where we have the Little Red Schoolhouse and the quarryman statue, is very significant, as well as the historical house and the Norcross House. Those are all really what the town is about. And I see Steve Graham there. One of the great things is the depot has been restored by Mr. Graham and is being utilized effectively, I hope, as a ice cream store stand. So
along the rail trail, right?
Along the rail trail, so that's over, and the rail trail is historic, and that's important. And I would love to see it extended northwards. That rail trail made a lot of the quarrying economically feasible, and that quarrying was what created East Longmeadow. What made us break away from Longmeadow as a separate town was the fact that we had an economic engine that they did not, and the conflict between the rulers in Longmeadow and the economic people engine in East Longmeadow eventually led to the rift, which is why we're a separate town. So that's all there. I am disappointed that nobody from the Historic Commission is on this call, but certainly I think there's a lot that the commission can do to promote the historical preservation in town.
Thank you. It's very helpful. Anyone else like to add their thoughts?
I think in terms of events, probably the biggest one that everyone's always fond of is the 4th of July parade that we do in town.
And what's so special about the East Longmeadow 4th of July parade? Because I have heard lots about it, but I'd love to hear it from some of you who live there.
Probably just the fact that it's actually a decent size and that we do one where most of our neighbors just shoot off fireworks and that's it.
Also, I think it's something that people, even people who have moved out of town, they come back for that. I happen to live on the parade route, and the first year that we lived here, some people knocked on the door and they said, look, we used to live here and our son married the girl across the street, and would you mind if we watched the parade from your front lawn? And they came back for years and years, and it's just,
That's
a
cool.
lot of people do that. They just want to come back for that.
Mhm. That's cool. Thank you for that story.
I think, can I just say, I think the parade's great in that it just kind of brings the whole town together. You have multiple different aspects of town, whether it's sports programs or Boy Scouts or whatever have you. And it's just because the town's so small, the parade is definitely a great way to just bring everybody together and just brings a lot of pride to the town and stuff. And that's a great example. It's just a great thing for town.
Awesome.
Yeah, I used to be on the board of the Norcross House, and I'm happy Donna is here with us. She's the current president. And we used to sit on the front porch of the Norcross House for the parade every year, or on the lawn. And it really drew attention to the historic value of the Norcross House because people would stop and talk to us about it. And it also got us involved in the big community event. It was so much fun. And we would, this is funny, but just as an aside, we had the apple place in town, which to me is, in a way, it is historic because it's one of the biggest local apple orchards, and they've done a great job of opening it to the public and making it a recreation area. So we had a commitment to buy the apple cider donuts and cider and have coffee.
Those are
for
good.
this event, so we would invite
So there's a
friends.
partnership there.
Yes, definitely. So we got to know each other really well. That was a lot of fun. But the Norcross House has a great value for the town, and its main mission is education and art. And so I know that they're working on, really connecting more of that to the community. So
Yeah, we'd like to do a lot more with the schools too, and get the kids in and learn in conjunction with, I've been here 32 years, and I think it was only 2 years ago that I finally got over to the museum. And just the things that are in there are just so interesting.
Is the museum in the Norcross House or in a different?
It's a separate house next door to the Norcross.
Oh, okay. So also near the rail trail, there's that little hub there.
Yep.
Okay.
Donna, I have an art teacher at the high school I can connect you with if you're interested.
Oh, that would be great.
Sure.
And I might mention that when we built the new library, we created a historical room there that contains archives from the town.
And that's on the second floor, is that right?
Yeah, and it is an underutilized resource because a lot of people don't even know it's there, and it's only open like one evening a week, unless you make special arrangements. So that's something else that is. The other thing I will mention is agriculture. The farms in town are historic farms. They've been there for probably 200 years. Okay, although they've passed through many different ownerships. And a friend of mine is an owner of one of the farms. She started, it was the last dairy farm in town. Okay, and she still rents the land out for vegetables. So those lands, really preserving them as agriculture is important. And I think that the people that are running them now are showing that it is economically feasible to do that in our town. That they're selling their produce to Big Y, but also locally at farm stands. And they're obviously economically feasible because they keep expanding, which I think is great. I think John Burney is doing an outstanding job with that. I just worry about when he decides to retire. But hopefully that will be a long time in the future.
And I'd never heard the term agritourism. Is that? Is that what someone said? That is very interesting to me. I'd like to find out more about that.
Oh, that's a long-term trend
Yeah.
of farms, not just farming and selling produce, but attracting people as an entertainment center.
So what
There's
the Apple Place does is an example.
Yeah, and there's another one out in Munson that is attracts huge
Echo
crowds.
Hill.
Echo Hill, yeah, you've heard of that, yeah.
Mhm. Yes, I have enjoyed their apple cider donuts as well.
So speaking of delicious food, I kind of want to pick a little bit on Steve because I know that Steve runs the depot, and you know, the depot is an important, well, at least from what I heard from the visioning session, it's an important cultural and historic resource, and also just a nice place to gather for folks in East Longmeadow. So I'm just curious as to you know, your thoughts and what you've seen in town.
Well, George, thank you for the mention. I just want to add one thing, that it's really my wife is the driving force, not me. So we got to make sure she gets some credit too. But you know, I'll address that the best I can, Fiona. And please keep in mind that this will be our first year of operation, and my wife and I have no experience in this area. We're involved in manufacturing business, but it's something that we've wanted to do for quite some time. I think the location, obviously, I agree with the comments on the historical significance of the depot, and that's why my wife and I tried to preserve the look as close as we possibly could to when it was built in 1876. The location offers just an extreme special opportunity for the town and the community at large because of the nearly 3-acre parcel that surrounds it, and the traffic count that goes by. And so our hope is that we can turn it into a community meeting area, not just to sell ice cream or other food. And the fact that the rail trail is probably the most widely used point in the town by the public, running right by us, offers the ability for us to, I think, easily inform the public of things that might be of interest to the community at large. And to your point, Francis, hopefully you'll come by, and you don't need to buy an ice cream, but there should be a lot of kids running around there all the time. So that's part of our grand plan. But just to address a couple points, I think when we looked at the train depot, most of these historical buildings that have been renovated, not just in the town of East Longmeadow, but in any town across, any place across America, are rarely entered. And it's not because people don't care, I don't think, but it just doesn't happen unless there's something that pulls them in, like food. So when you look at what's really happening across America in these historical buildings, unless there's something very, very unique and special about them, the ones that have traffic count are the ones that sell stuff that generally you eat. And that brings people in all the time. So if you're right across the street from the Norcross house and you come in for an ice cream, why couldn't you walk across the street while you're eating your ice cream and visit the Norcross house? You know, there's a real opportunity here to have those two structures visited far more than they've ever been before, if something can be coalesced. And if you really want to get the population to move into these facilities and visit these facilities, it's got to be more than just history that gets them there. So, you know, what we'll do, and I know your question started out with food, and I've really pushed it pretty far away from food, but we'll start with ice cream. We will probably, we have already agreed to offer the site to help other small businesses who are selling pastries, who are running a yoga studio, who are doing things that, you know, the community can participate in and enjoy. And we hope to continue to do that. We have plans of putting a farmer's market in there on Saturday mornings, having live music on Saturday afternoons, maybe car shows on Friday evenings, and doing a variety of different things. And our hope is that you, the community at large, come by and sit on a bench and see your neighbor, and they stop by and say hello. And if you buy an ice cream, great, but if you don't, we want you to enjoy it. And I think the center of town has this absolutely unique situation available that doesn't exist in many towns like it in Massachusetts. And if we can get some things going there, it will make a huge difference for activity, community, historical, you know, trails. You know, if there's a event on the Browns farm that is publicized, you'll increase the awareness of that tremendously. So.
Awesome, Steve. Thanks. That was great.
Yes, Steve, what you were saying is true. It's hard to get people to come to like the Norcross House, and I know the museum too. I know they open up one Saturday afternoon a month, or they did before COVID. And even sometimes nobody would go in there. And we toyed with the idea. We went a couple Saturdays when they opened up thinking, oh, if people would go over there, maybe they would come over to Norcross. They don't. The only time we get people in is if we have some kind of program. Like when we did that paranormal program, we thought, oh, if we get 10, 15 people in, this will be good. And I think we had like 70 people that night, which is great. And almost everybody went through the property. And it looked like we were going to have a lot more interest in people doing things with it. And then COVID hit. So that momentum stopped. But if there's a way, yeah, and I'd love to work with you guys and like, you know, yeah, come across the street and we'll give you tours, or, you know, you can come over and sit on the porch and have your ice cream. Because yeah, the center of town, if we can do more with the businesses and get people out and walking around more, that would be great.
This is really exciting to hear. I've had a vision for downtown area, taking into consideration all the cultural points, of making it a cultural district. And there's certain criteria that it has to fall into, but basically that would be an established district where anybody within that would be able to apply for certain grants for program funding that are around cultural and arts and music and all of that sort of thing. So it would really help bring some of that programming that we lack in town to a center.
Yeah, absolutely. And the basis of it is already there with the rail trail and some of the buildings that are being reused. And I would spend a lot of time there recently because my son was going to Meadows driving school. So I would go into the Willow Barn in the previous residence that's now a business, and I just enjoy that area. So I think that's really exciting. And that was one of my other questions, which I talked about a bit with Joanne recently, about partnerships with the Cultural Council. And you have so many great organizations. So you've already started the conversation and the brainstorming. So I think that's really exciting.
And building on what Steve said, one of the things I think we need to give the town credit for is they have 3 historic buildings, including the town hall, that have been renovated over the years and are still actively in use as town buildings. And that would include the senior center, okay, which is an old schoolhouse, and the Little Red Schoolhouse, which is a one-room school that was on North Main Street and was moved to Center Hill Park, where the original Center Hill School was, and is currently being used as an activity center. Okay. Some of those buildings do need some more work. Little Red Schoolhouse is not accessible, and we've been beating on that for several years now, and nothing has happened. But eventually, we might find some money to put a ramp in so that people can get in there and renovate the bathroom as well, so that it's accessible. But certainly, Town Hall needs more accessibility, and I know there are plans in the works to do that, while respecting the historic portions of the town building. So, you know, the town has thought along those lines. Again, it's been a budgetary issue over the years.
Thank you. Those are good points.
Georgia,
May I?
was the Little Red Schoolhouse, the town hall, and what was the third? I'm sorry.
The
I
senior
didn't write it
center.
Senior center, yeah, the
Thank
senior
you.
center.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that's also, the senior center is on Main Street. Is that right? Okay, well, we've kind of talked about this a little bit with some other topics, but can you think of ways that the town's history could be highlighted to increase residents and visitors' sense of place? So I think we had talked about previously about wayfinding signage and things like that. Does anyone else have any other ideas about ways to make connections both for residents and people who are visiting?
Well, we already have signage on the rail trail, which points to historic.
I think it would be so cool if we had some sort of interactive map online that showed where all the quarries are and had a little blurb about their historical impact and when they started, when they were closed down, because that's something I've been interested in and have struggled to find more information on. Just
so maybe like a story map.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
One name, Bruce Moore, knows more about the quarries than anybody.
Yes, I've had many offline conversations with Bruce Moore, so I'm writing everything he says down and sending him invitations to every meeting. Okay, that's great. I know we've had a lot of talk about the quarries. They're so important to town history.
I always had this grand idea that we would have like a East Longmeadow day that maybe would be like a closing off part of the streets and having a people powered walking day. I would love to see, like, I love how the Rotary gets used on the 4th of July in this different way, but could we do it so that people are invited to walk on the Rotary with their own feet and their little bikes and strollers, and maybe people like Bruce Moore and other knowledgeable people in town could lead talks about the historic buildings they're passing. I did one that we had Bruce Moore bring us when my boys were in Cub Scouts to the Pine Quarry, and it was I think it's the coolest thing in town, and all the knowledge that he had. And I always picture, like, you know, getting people out and walking on streets, walking in areas that you normally couldn't just walk. I love that idea of closing off the streets and like that.
And that happens for the 4th of July parade too, right?
It does,
So you're not the first person who's mentioned just that nice feeling about being able to walk in the circle and
Okay, that's all right.
gather. Yeah, that's
I
great.
have a sick kid, so I have a sick kid, so I'm running back and
Oh,
forth. I
no.
apologize.
Oh, no problem. That's a great idea. Thank you for sharing that thought.
I like her idea of separating it from the 4th of July. So there'd be 2 events a year, let's say, right? The 4th of July, and then maybe in the fall or spring, this East Longmeadow Day. That would be great. I think it's
Hey, what happens if we did like a 5K with it? I mean, because the town's very small. I don't know if that's a possibility with it. You know, you're saying get the kids out and get people walking. Maybe we did like a 2K walk and a 5K run or something like that. It's good that the town's very small, and maybe there's a way to bring attention more to historical parts of town in that regard.
Yeah.
Could we possibly tie that in with National Night Out, which we do every year, which is a big event, actually?
And that's held in one of the parks in East Longmeadow?
That's held at the high school.
At the high school, okay.
Right, which is on Maple Street, which is just a quarter mile from the Rotary.
Mm-hmm.
When is that, George?
Usually in July, is it, or August?
I think August, yeah.
Yeah, August. I don't remember the date, but it's a big deal. But the fire department comes out and sprays everybody with water, and we have the medevac helicopter come in, and all the nonprofits and churches and many businesses set up tables there and talk about what they do. It's really, they have a car show. It's a real family event.
Yeah, those are fun. Well, the East Longmeadow Day idea reminds me of where I grew up in Pennsylvania. I grew up in a farming community, and we had Harvest Day in the fall, and it was a big deal as a kid because you were allowed to go there and walk around by yourself because it was safe, and there was lots of food, and maybe there's something that could highlight your agricultural and historical aspects of East Longmeadow.
So we already do have a celebration.
You do?
In October, Celebrate East Longmeadow that Rotary sponsors.
Okay.
And that's probably something that a lot of people don't even realize. It's not terribly well attended, but certainly something that could be built upon for sure.
Okay, and that's in October, sponsored by Rotary.
Rotary.
And the boards of the Lions Club and Norcross, we've talked about we have the tree lighting ceremony in December when we light the tree in the Rotary and Santa Claus comes. And we were talking about what if we made it a weekend thing where maybe we had like the Norcross House, usually the weekend after Thanksgiving, we have our wreath sale. We could put it off to the same weekend as the tree lighting, and maybe we could have like a stroll for the businesses. And I've talked to a couple managers of restaurants who have said, oh, that's a good idea. We could maybe get together and get like special drinks or appetizers for that weekend. So I don't know if that's something that can be done. I've been accused of trying to make Longmeadow into a Hallmark movie, but I mean, I think that would be
There's nothing wrong with that.
Out, and if we could have some kind of activities at center field for the kids, and
that's like what Joanne and I were talking about this week. She was saying with the cultural council that she knows there's opportunities that would be good to have partnerships, but it's hard to figure out. So this is great that you're all even. It sounds like in various ways partnerships have already been brainstorming ways, and there's already the foundation for some of these events where you could really work together and really do something extra special.
Yeah, the Lions have always talked about making the tree lighting a little bit bigger, having like a little, we were talking about maybe a truck parade, or having more things on the lawn for kids to do, or having more of carolers or something like that. So
yeah, what is it in West Springfield? Start and Tavern, and I think Sturbridge Village and Historic Deerfield. I think they all have Christmas type events that draw people that utilize the historic resources, but also have a programming for all ages. So you already have a lot of the foundation in place. So those are exciting ideas.
I'm curious, these are all very, very amazing ideas. And is there anything that we could loop into these ideas, an underutilized resource in town that really should be, utilized for efforts like this, that you can think of off the top of your head, particularly in the area that Steve was explaining earlier, in proximity to the rail trail and his business and the kind of 3 acres of land there? Is there anything that you can think of at the top of your head that could be, really a benefit if it was, given some attention or TLC or go ahead, Joe.
Hey, Fiona, I would say that I think there's more opportunity to utilize center field, which is basically right next to the rail trail and this new ice cream shop, in a manner
great.
that would be better to bring people together because it's so close, because everyone's downtown. I feel like parking might be an issue down there, so that would be something that would, if there's a way to address that, that would be ideal. But I feel like personally for me that field could be utilized probably more efficiently, and that it's a great place to bring people together. It's our central location for the carnival that we have over a couple of days during the 4th of July timeframe. So it's a great spot. And I think that would probably be a great spot for all of that, because the tree is nearby as well. A lot of the activities that we do are downtown, and that field could,
I agree with you. I know we're always saying we don't have enough playing fields, and I know those fields get used for baseball and other things, but to me, it feels like that field should be more multi-use. It's right there in our center, and for some reason now I'm almost picturing the quarryman statue standing in the middle of that field, like bringing sort of it would be cool if there was something there that sort of pointed to our town's history, and maybe a gazebo and more multi-use, not just a baseball field that's sort of gated off. It has a kind of like, you can't use it unless you're doing sports right now feel to it. And I think there's a lot of potential there.
Awesome.
I also, sorry, Steve, go ahead.
There's also, there's a little parking area that the town receives some grant money on, and Bethany could explain it better than me, but it's some picnic tables were put out recently. So half of the parking lot is now used for people who want to grab something and have a place to sit outside. I actually was surprised at how much use it got when I would be working down there and noticing people utilizing it. But the retention pond that is next to the parking lot, I was riding by it the other night, and I wondered why it wasn't used for skating. And maybe Bethany or George or someone can speak to that. But we actually were thinking at one time before we actually bought the land that the depot sits on, we were going to have to move the depot, and we were going to move it onto that. We were going to put it on a barge and put it on that little pond there. But that might be something that area in general doesn't get a lot of use. And the little kids ball field right there offers some opportunity. And the other thing I'd like to mention is the Carlin Engineering Building, which of course has some environmental issues, but that is really a key parcel that either private development has to take place, or the town. I don't know if the town has ever considered trying to take that over, but that's almost another 3-acre parcel that would be, I think, a tremendous asset for the town. And the Carlin Engineering Building, if you don't know which one that is, it's on the other side of the rail trail. It's been vacant for quite a few years, right? And the environmental remediation has been taking place over probably a 10-year period.
I
I
can
might-
jump in about, oh, sorry, George.
There's a comment on the ponds in the center. Those are not retention ponds, those were fire ponds. The fire
Oh.
department used to be next to it, and they'd fill up their tankers from those ponds. And one of the reasons I wouldn't skate on them is that there's a stream that goes through them, and the ice tends to not be very thick on them, believe it or not. I've seen ducks in there when everything else is frozen. So that's one of the reasons they don't skate on there.
Okay.
But that's another historic thing that very few people know about. Okay, it used to be two of them. They made them into one maybe 20 years ago, but that's where they came from.
And were those firehouses demolished?
No, the firehouse is still there.
Okay.
It was used by the JCs, and the JCs no longer exist, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but so now it's just being used, I think, for storage. But it's still there. Most people don't even know it's there because you drive past it so fast. It's a tiny little thing.
Okay.
One of the things that strikes me is we've got some really active civic groups. We've got the Lions Club, we've got the Rotary, we've got the Garden Club, believe it or not. We've got other groups in town. What I don't see is any formal coordination between the groups. I mean, I know people in Rotary, I know people in Lions, I'm in the Garden Club. We talk to each other, but there's no formal coordination, no way to really get together and talk about how do we divide up what needs to be done and get it done and do stuff together, except individually, one person on one person. And that's something that maybe we ought to think about. Should there be some sort of meeting place where the different civic organizations get together and talk about what they can do together?
Maybe like how the CPC has members from different, like there could be some sort of committee made up of all of those types of groups that would even meet quarterly just to talk about what you all have going on.
Yeah,
The
something like
Lions
that.
had talked about that years ago and it just didn't go anywhere, but I think that's a great idea. If we have a representative or two from each club or civic organization and they meet like once a month or whatever, that would be great.
I think that's a great idea too. I mean, recreation works with Rotary, but we don't tend to work at, with the other groups, but it's just like Steve mentioned, having a farmer's market and entertainment on Saturdays. We're planning on doing it on Fridays, but I don't want to compete against, we need to organize because I don't want to run a Friday and a Saturday night and then compete for vendors. And that's not the purpose that we were looking for. So I think that there has to be some kind of a vehicle that we talk. I mean, we don't want to duplicate services by any means.
And it sounds like with all these partnerships, it'll just strengthen whatever you're trying to do. So that's great.
I just wanted to piggyback on what Steve said. I was going to mention the businesses to the right, as you're going, depends what direction, across from the rail trail. And there's that little street, I forget the name now, but the little street that cuts through,
Maple Court.
Sorry?
Maple Court.
Yes, Maple Court. There, if people in that area, if those business owners could become involved with, someone mentioned that businesses are going to get involved with the rail trail or get involved with beautifying the central area. I don't know how to say this nicely, but maybe they would clean up their area so that it would really fit in, especially with the depot. That's going to be a really great gathering place. And the town can't tell them they have to, but sure would be nice if that street were a part of the, the whole, what we're trying to create in the center of town, because it's really an eyesore right now. Thank you.
Yeah, DPW and I got some funding for a grant over the summer, and that helped with the getting those tables in that parking lot. And part of the reason I had that parking lot set up was to draw attention to the fire pond, because it is such a really lovely, small, natural, just scenery downtown that you don't really see because you're just driving past it so fast. But it's really just a beautiful spot, and really underutilized. So we did have some artists in the community come out and do some murals, and we had the Girl Scouts involved in painting a section of the pavement there, just to bring some color and life to it. But it's a difficult spot because it's industrial, and so those businesses are more focused on industrial aspects of what they're doing for their businesses.
Hey, Bethany, I just want to say that I think those tables are actually really nice, in that they also kind of dual purpose and serve to help families watch their kids play baseball at Leahy Field right there, which is also really nice. And then, you know, maybe to that end, I know that, you know, it may be very premature, but I know that there was some talks of looking at, you know, potential lights for the baseball diamonds and potentially almost that entire center field area. I think the Rec Commission was looking into it. I don't know how far it is or how far it may go, but something like that would be great. Like where you could just kind of grab an ice cream at night, you know, take a walk down there, sit down and watch a baseball game and kind of enjoy the fire pond at the same time. And just be able to be a little bit more accessible down there if it were to be cleaned up. And I don't know if it's too much to say to make that street Maple Court a dead end, but people sure do drive down there really fast, and it would be nice to see them have some way to slow them down, you know?
Yeah, we did try that. We had basically big planters that we put kind of sporadically on Maple Court just to slow people down because you really couldn't fit 2 cars on there. But because those businesses get almost daily deliveries, they couldn't fit the delivery trucks couldn't fit into the space, unload the material, and also have cars coming through at the same time. So we had to adjust where the planters were located. Luckily, they are easy to move, so we didn't have too many conflicts with that issue. But that was our original intent, was to try to make it more pedestrian friendly and try to get people walking on it and bicycling on it as well.
I just wanted to before we run out of time, just mention a little bit more about the Cultural Council. And I mean, the Cultural Council has money to give. You know, it is a grant process. You do have to apply, but you know, it is eligible for events that might benefit the community, cultural type events, but that's a pretty broad category actually. And I don't know how many people even are aware of the Cultural Council or how it works, or that there is money for grants, but they are for events that would benefit the community. That is what, you know, the type of grants that we give out. We already give money to the concert and to some of the other town events that actually have applied for, you know, for grants. And we do have, because of COVID, we had extra money this year. So we did put aside some money for the council to have an event. We haven't even gone there to think about what that might be. But if there are thoughts about something, you know, that we could partner with another organization, but we do have, that's not a fortune. We don't get tons of money because we're not that big of a community, but because they're not getting used because of COVID, you know, right now we have a little more money than usual. But anyway, so yeah, we're going to do something. We just don't even know what it is yet. But so if there are thoughts, we're open for partnerships.
That's great. Well, before we run out of time, I just wanted to ask real quick about things that you think maybe the biggest threats to East Longmeadow's historic and cultural resources. For example, you talked about a firehouse building that was currently vacant or not being used, or any thoughts about things or places in East Longmeadow that you're concerned about for the future?
I'd just like to piggyback off of that, just saying, you know, also thinking from a lens of, you know, that are environmental lens to, you know, what areas or places could benefit from additional, preparedness in an environmental emergency, or what areas are compromised in a compromising position due to, local like environmental issues. I'm curious because obviously historic buildings are already kind of dealing with some structural probably weaknesses there. So I'm just wanted to add that. Sorry, and I think I cut off Carissa, so I apologize for that. Go ahead.
No worries. I just wanted to repeat what I think George said towards the beginning of the conversation, that in terms of agricultural lands being a cultural asset, that a large portion of them are privately owned and not protected in any way, and mostly by one person. And if they retire or decide, not to pass them on to another farmer, there's lots of land around town that could be vulnerable to development. And I don't know if there's any protocol for in the master plan for choosing the top 10 priority pieces for conservation in town, and then being proactive in terms of reaching out to the landowners and maybe trying to get right of first purchase, or having conversations with landowners and saying, hey, your parcels have been identified as, sort of like priority pieces for the town. And I don't know how that process works, but if there's anything we can do proactively.
That's certainly a possibility. And I think one of the things that we've talked about in the past is encouraging landowners to go to the agricultural preservation restriction route. And I know that there are pluses and minuses of that for farmers. Particularly, you get money up front, but you don't get money at the end. And that's always an issue. But I think that's something that's been underutilized, and I'm not sure that all of our farmers are really familiar with the potential there.
I know there are some properties in Amherst that have actively farmed land that are under agricultural preservation restrictions. So maybe it would be useful to talk to somebody who's currently went that route.
Yeah, in my short term as a Conservation Commission member, that has been a real concern for me. Privately owned farms where the owners want to build and parcel off some of their farms, and in some cases it's a large area. And I didn't know how that, when I asked the question, I was told, well, it's Planning Commission approves it, and that's then it comes to us and it's a done deal before we get it. If that's correct, then it kind of breaks my heart, because it's too late by that time to bring up the fact that some of this land could be preserved, or there's other routes for the owners. I don't know if I expressed that correctly, but it's something that I've been very concerned.
Well, Bethany can correct me here, but the standard procedure is for developers to go to conservation first and then come to planning, because conservation is the one that says this is where you can build and this is where you can't. And there's no sense in submitting a plan to us that doesn't meet conservation requirements. But the fact is, let's face it, a developer comes in and waves money in your face, and we're talking big money. It's kind of hard to say no.
Yeah, that's why I'm wondering if these documents that we're creating have any teeth to them. So if that does happen, can we point to our open space plan, and are these properties listed there as priorities, and we can say, okay, let's pause for a minute here. This has been documented as something the town sees value in. Can we take a step back and try to negotiate? Or, is there anything we can do before the developer is at the meeting and it's gotten that far?
I think to your point, Carissa, these documents, the open space plan that the town approved last year, as well as the master plan, in which the planning board will approve eventually, it's important that maybe regulations be explored that suggest that those documents have teeth. And obviously your town planner will be very instrumental in some of those conversations with developers, identifying the parcels that have been identified as ones that the town would like to, suggest acquiring for open space, or just the preservation of that particular land. But I think the documents are there to suggest that the town has gone through this planning process to identify, the places that are important to preserve and develop.
Thanks, Ken. So we're at time. Shannon, I don't mean to cut you off. If there's any last minute questions, or any last minute thoughts that people have before we break for tonight, anything that we didn't talk about that should be mentioned for cultural and historic resources. It seemed like this was a really great discussion. There was a lot of topics covered, but in case we didn't mention anything, I want to ask.
I just wanted to mention really quickly, if anybody's having issues connecting with a certain group in town, I would be happy to be the conduit for that. Part of what I've been trying to do, especially since COVID started, is connect people with each other who are trying to make things happen and have a similar vision. So I'm happy to be that person. If you are trying to reach out to somebody not having any luck, feel free to reach out to me.
Don, I'm happy to sit down or have a conversation with you anytime you have available, so that we can coordinate efforts and don't have competing events.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. Anybody else have anything they want to share? All right. Thank you all so very much. This was great.
Fiona, can I just say one more
Joe.
thing? Just to piggyback off what Carissa said about making things a priority within the document. I don't know if anybody mentioned, creating awareness as being a priority, but I think that would be a very big priority that we should try and put within the document, since it's not a specific policy, right? This document, it's more of like a guideline. So I think creating awareness would be something that would be good to make it a priority.
Okay.
So that people know, what we're trying to do and what we're trying to preserve, and so on and so forth.
And I just also would like to remind people that putting it as a priority in the master plan means that if you ever want to go for a grant to acquire a piece of property, okay, whether it's from a private foundation or from the state or the feds, it has to be in the plan. If you come up with, we want an opportunity to get a grant, but the parcel is not mentioned in the plan, you lose many, many points. And so it's important to do it from that point of view only. Not that there's that much money out there, but if you happen to luck into something, you better have it listed.
You're right, George. Yep. All righty. Well, again, thank you all for coming. Feel free to email me. I put my email in the chat if you need anything or you want to follow up in any way. And yeah, thank you again. And we will be in touch. And if you want to provide more feedback, you all have the questions. So, fill them out, send them back to me or Bethany or whoever. All righty. It was lovely meeting you all, and have an excellent night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Good evening.